Hi, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Packers Unscripted from Packers.com. I am Mike Spofford, joined, as always, by my trusted colleague, Weston Hodkowitz. We're coming to you here from our studios at Lambeau Field to preview Sunday Night Football, Wes. It will be Packers-Bills from Buffalo in primetime at Highmark Stadium, though I know you still like to call it the Ralph, which you did on our Three Things video
Highmark isn't paying
yesterday. So,
yeah, it's the Ralph.
What used to be known as Ralph Wilson Stadium is where the Packers will face the Bills on Sunday night. It's a Buffalo Bills team that is 5-1, coming off a bye week, looking every bit the Super Bowl contender they were touted as before the season began. And when you look at this team, Wes, it all starts at quarterback with Josh Allen, who is squarely in the conversation for the MVP as we near the midway point of 2022.
He is, and we're going to discuss all the Bills and how good they are in here in a second, but I don't know if you saw the renderings of that stadium that they have, that they've prospectively put together.
Oh, no, I actually haven't.
They just came out, I think, like either yesterday, we just saw it. It's pretty nice. Yeah. These NFL stadiums, bro, I mean, we haven't been able to get to SoFi yet.
Yeah, we haven't. Yeah, that's one place we haven't
or
been
Allegiant,
yet.
But they're pretty. It's pretty wild the way these things are developing, and this is why you do it, right? I mean, the Buffalo Bills have never been hotter, at least during my adult life. Maybe going back to when I was in elementary school. I mean, this team and what they have, they are so complete, and they feed off each other so well. I mean, that's what all the best championship teams do, right? It wasn't just that Aaron Rodgers was at the peak of his powers in 2011 and 12 and 10. It was they had all this emerging talent around him. It's that they had a defense that was as solid as what Buffalo has. Offensively, I always love telling the story. 2018, when we were still doing our pregame show out at Lambeau Field before the games, Josh Allen whacked me in the calf with a ball. That's where he was at his rookie season. And in warm-ups, he threw a ball and it missed the receiver and hit me literally and almost bruised my calf. I mean, that's how hard it was thrown. And now you look at him, and this is this guy is going to be a factor in the National Football League for the next 15 years.
Yeah,
I mean,
no question about it.
He is the crown jewel of that draft class. There's a lot of great quarterbacks that year, but when you look at where he has steered the Buffalo Bills, it's all on his shoulders. Yes, Stephon Diggs is fantastic. Gabe Davis is coming on. Defensively, Von Miller's brought a lot to that defense, but Josh Allen is the show, and you're seeing why.
Yeah, well, statistically, Josh Allen, 17 touchdowns, 4 interceptions, a 109.1 passer rating, which is second in the league, just barely below Patrick Mahomes, though Josh Allen won the head-to-head with Patrick Mahomes very recently here. The other interesting thing, of course, about Allen statistically is he's actually Buffalo's leading rusher. He has 257 rushing yards, which is one more than Devin Singletary, and actually 10 fewer attempts. And when Josh Allen has a 5.5 yard average per rushing attempt, and you know that there are several -1 kneel downs, into that calculation, whether it's a designed run or a scramble, when Josh Allen takes off and runs, there's a very good chance it's a chunk play, an explosive type of play for this Buffalo offense, and that's what makes them so tough to stop, because Josh Allen doesn't have to get rid of the ball to make a big play.
Yeah, and the weird thing about this whole situation the Packers have been in, regardless of the skid they've been on, is the quarterbacks they're playing. At some point in time, these QBs, I guess, remember when for so many years they were telling Aaron Rodgers, you got to make sure you slide, you got to make sure you get down. And now Green Bay is going through this gauntlet of Daniel Jones, Taylor Heineke, and now Josh Allen. These guys have never even heard of the idea of sliding.
Right.
I mean, they are going to – Josh Allen's going to throw his shoulder into you. Even Kenny Clark talked about it at his locker on Wednesday. He's like Big Ben, but he's more fleet of foot.
Yeah.
I mean, he has the size, but he also has a lot of athleticism too. He's going to create big plays. He's going to do it with his feet. He's going to do it with his arm. Stephon Diggs has been, I mean, when you talk about, Mike, when trades happen in the National Football League and there's winners and losers, the Bills got Stephon Diggs, the Vikings got Justin Jefferson, and those two guys have just completely ascended in their own respects in these avenues.
Yep.
Gabe Davis is actually on my fantasy team right now, 27.5 yards per catch. He had the 98-yard touchdown last week. There are a lot of threats the Packers will have to neutralize to be successful at the Ralph.
Well, you look at, and I want to talk about these receivers a little bit too, because you look at Stephon Diggs. 6 games now Buffalo has played, as we mentioned, coming off of a bye week. In 6 games, Stephon Diggs has 49 catches, 656 yards, and 6 touchdowns. I mean, the math there says he's on pace for, 125 plus receptions, like 1,800 plus yards, and, 17 TDs. I mean, he is on pace here in the early going for an absolutely monster year. And then, as you said, you have to deal with Gabe Davis as well, who only has 14 catches on the year, but 4 of those have gone for touchdowns. As you mentioned, a 98-yard touchdown, which has boosted his average on those 14 receptions to 27.5 yards per catch. This is an offense that can gash you. They can make the big play at any time. And no, they don't have much of a running game. As I mentioned, Josh Allen is the team's leading rusher, but they are so dangerous because of Allen's dual threat ability and because of these receivers, and you throw in a tight end like Dawson Knox who can make a lot of things happen. This is a tough unit to handle, and you know going into Buffalo in primetime under the lights with Aaron Rodgers coming to town for the first time in 8 years, the Buffalo crowd is going to be, I mean, it's the atmosphere in that place is going to be something else for just a regular season football game.
And we don't need to revisit 2014 and that matchup there, but the one thing, it's the only time I've ever been at Landmark Stadium. I'm just going to let that go throughout the entire show. No, it's the first time I've been to Buffalo since that game. And that day it was Kyle Orton, who had been signed that year to play quarterback. Their season was pretty much, for the lack of a better term, over. I mean, they were hovering around 500 if I remember right. And the feeling in that stadium was not one of jubilation. It was pretty melancholy up until the end when they ended up actually winning the game. This is going to be a lot different.
Yeah.
Sammy Watkins, the former Buffalo Bill, was talking about this. He's like, when the Bills are good, when they're winning football games, it's like a college town atmosphere. I mean, that's what that's like. I mean, you and I are going to see it when we're pulling up on the buses. Maybe there'll be someone going through a table. We're not sure.
Yeah.
But
yeah, our buses sort of go, because I've been there for 2 games, 2006 and 2014. And the buses that take us from the hotel to the stadium, we go through like these neighborhoods. Mm-hmm. It's the most similar to Green Bay and Lambeau
100%.
Field of any place in the NFL, where you're going through these neighborhoods and you're seeing people with their their tailgate parties in their driveway, in their yards, cars being parked, collecting $20 here and there, whatever. That's what it's like, and our buses go right through that. So yeah, I'll be watching to see if what sort of shenanigans are happening, especially with it being a night game where folks are going to have all day to get ready for this one.
But what I really like too about the Bills offensively is, so you look at a guy like Devin Singletary, and Singletary's not a guy that everyone's like, oh, well, this is a big, huge threat. But for what the Bills want to do, he complements it perfectly because he can run. But he's also their second leading pass catcher in terms of the number of receptions. They drafted Zach Moss. He's involved in that too. But, I mean, Singletary is the guy that kind of complements the whole thing. And there's just, Mike, you just don't see a lot of weaknesses across the board. Now, the Packers are going to have to do a lot of things right. But, Jamison Crowder's on this roster. Obviously, I think Jake Kumerow is going through some injury stuff right now. But they are veteran. They are versatile, and certainly when you have those type of playmakers at the quarterback position and guys that can be game wreckers down the field, like Diggs and like Gabe Davis, there's a lot that Green Bay has to account for.
For sure. And on the defensive side of the ball, this is the unit that is ranked number 1 in the league in both yards allowed and points allowed. A lot of statistics certainly jump off the page. Von Miller with 6 sacks. The young guy Russo has 4. Those 2 guys with 10 combined. Jordan Poyer in the back end has 4 of this defense's 10 interceptions on the season. A huge challenge for a Green Bay offense that is continuing to try to find itself, to clean up the mental mistakes as well as the physical mistakes, settling in with a new offensive line. Obviously, the Packers are banged up at receiver. We don't know who all is going to be available at wide receiver for Sunday night just yet. This is a tremendous challenge because this Buffalo this Buffalo defense, they got Von Miller for a reason, right?
Yeah.
They knew they were close, but they felt, when you get knocked out of the playoffs by allowing, in essence, by allowing a field goal to extend a game in 12 seconds or 13 seconds or whatever it was, you're like, all right, we need to get a finisher on defense. Von Miller is that guy that when that defense needs a big time pressure or a sack or a strip sack fumble, whatever it is, they're counting on Miller to deliver it, and so far this season he has.
Yeah, and Miller really has been. I don't want to start throwing out like Reggie White type comparisons, but when you look at where he has gone and the impact he's had, he's really been like that finishing piece for a lot of these really good defenses around the National Football League.
Certainly was for the Rams, helping them win the Super Bowl last year.
Yeah, and then certainly, I mean, we don't need to talk about 15 and what he did on those Denver Broncos teams, but the craziest part of this deal for the Bills is they're doing all this without Micah Hyde. Micah gets that neck injury early in the season. He's done for the year. Everybody, for so long, they've been talking about how Poyer and Hyde are probably one of the best, if not the best, safety combination in the National Football League right now, both how they play off of each other and really their ball hawking skills. I feel like, especially with dealing with some of his own injuries, this has only brought out the best in Jordan Poyer. 4 interceptions on the season. We hear so often from Packers players, from coaches, marrying the pass rush to the pass coverage. That's what a good defense does. Buffalo does all of it. 3rd in the league, I think, in takeaways, lead the league with 10 interceptions. I let Miami slip out of my mouth there because I was going to say the only team that's had success, the only team that's beaten them, and again, it was a barn burner type game, was the Dolphins. They didn't do it by running the ball well against them. They barely ran the ball at all. They did it by not having turnovers. The few explosive plays they had, they scored on all of them, and they made the most of their red zone opportunities. The same thing has to happen for the Packers to be successful against this defense.
Right, and what Miami did in that game, because statistically that game, the one game Buffalo lost this year, was lopsided in a number of statistics in favor of the Buffalo Bills. The number of plays, the yards, everything, and it wasn't a big turnover fest. But the other thing that Miami did is Miami's defense continued to rise up in the red zone, backed up against the goal line, whatever the case might be. Miami's defense made key plays at key times, and so all these plays and yards and everything that Buffalo piled up, the Bills weren't able to convert those into enough points to pull out a game that they otherwise dominated up and down the field. So. That was my next question to you with regard to what are the keys to victory here. I think another category that sticks out is that Buffalo offensively is number 1 in the league in third down conversions. Third down conversion percentage. Green Bay defensively is number 3 in the league. But as we've seen, we had talked about a couple of the 3rd and longs that were converted in London by the Giants that sort of turned the tide in that game. And then the second half last week against Washington where whether it was 3rd and short or 3rd and long, the Packers just couldn't get off the field. Washington converting a lot of 3rd downs in that second half. So we've seen Green Bay have some struggling moments in that regard. And, it's going to be difficult enough in some respects to get a big play offense like the Buffalo Bills into a lot of 3rd downs. But if the Packers get them into 3rd down, they're going to have to get off the field that way.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, for the Green Bay Packers, you ask about how they win this game. To me, there's 3 things that this is going to boil down to. It is the 3rd down defense. They need that to hold true in this game. As you mentioned, 3rd right now in the National Football League. It is their red zone defense. They're 6th right now in the National Football League. If the Bills do get into deep territory, you need to find ways to keep them out of the end zone because they're not going to be punting a ton. There's going to be plays that they are going to extend. They're going to have 10-play, 12-play drives. Do you generate takeaways off of that? Are you able to stop them and force them to send the field goal unit on?
Yeah, and hey, 4th and 3 from the 45-yard line, Sean McDermott's going for it most of the time. I mean, it's not just the 3rd down defense. You have to be ready for them to roll the dice on 4th down too.
Yeah, exactly. And then obviously that's something that Green Bay is going to have to take into account. And realistically, it comes back to what happened last week with Taylor Heineke. The Packers, again, as I mentioned on Tuesday's show, they had 29 pressures according to Pro Football Focus. whatever it was, 9 quarterback hits or whatever that number was. Maybe it was even more than that. 1 sack. The Packers have to be able to finish plays, pressure, contain, be smart about it. That was another thing Kenny Clark and Dean Lowry both talked about. Knowing your rush lanes, making sure that Allen doesn't leak out, because the dangerous thing about him is he can make every throw from every point of the field. He'll throw across the hashes if he has to, if he sees the opportunity. But he also is not afraid to tuck the ball and run it. That's where Green Bay has to be able to hold up. And also, I know it's been a grind for Green Bay with the run defense so far this season, 27th or whatever it is in the league right now. Making sure that Singletary doesn't get a lot of production, making sure that Allen doesn't leak out. You do want to make sure that you're forcing this thing to the pass, because to me, Green Bay, they've been in this drought with takeaways and turnovers that I think can only last so long. You can only get your hands on so many passes before those things finally start getting caught. They need takeaways in this matchup.
Yeah, absolutely. And Buffalo has given the ball away 10 times so far this year. That ranks, around the bottom third of the league in terms of the giveaways. And we had talked on our last show about how the Packers they got the big pick six. They almost had another defensive score, if not for the penalty, but they had opportunities for other turnovers. And you get your hands on the ball, you've got to cash in on it. You can't let those chances get away. On the offensive side, as I talked about before, the Packers are trying to figure themselves out. They're trying to clean up the mental mistakes, the physical mistakes. The Packers just offensively, especially against the number one defense in the league, you've got to play as clean a football as you can play. The mental errors that Aaron Rodgers is talking about, 20% of the plays that they're running have a mental error by somebody, a missed assignment by somebody. That can't continue. The physical mistakes, the drop passes, the poor technique that leads to holding calls, those are the Packers simply have to clean up everything to give themselves opportunities against a Buffalo defense, because what's going to help you out the most against Josh Allen is to create a game with fewer possessions, right? You can't let Josh Allen take the field 13 or 14 times. So the way you do that is by getting back to, and you had mentioned this in Insider Inbox, getting back to winning the time of possession. The Packers need to convert on third down, move the chains, shorten the game in the sense of not putting your defense out there as many times against a guy like Josh Allen. There's so much that the Packers need to clean up offensively, but at some point they're going to do it, and when they do it, we're gonna see it. We're gonna know what it looks like, and we're gonna see a team that's gonna give itself a much better chance to win, regardless of the opponent, compared to what we've seen the last couple of weeks.
Exactly, and offensively, maximizing your opportunities, first down, being able to move the ball, get first downs, being able to actually generate big plays organically and not having to force them.
That was the other thing. You had made a comment in Inbox earlier this week about the second and longs, and I went back and counted from the Washington game, and if I counted correctly, I counted 6 different times in the game the Packers were in 2nd and 10 or more. Yeah. 6 times 2nd and 10 or more. You can't live that way on offense. No. It's just that's not a way you can survive in this league. It doesn't mean you have to be in 2nd and 2 all day, but you need to be in 2nd and 6 and 2nd and 5 most of the day to give yourself a chance.
Because if you're in a position, God forbid, I think there's even a couple 2nd and 25s. If you're in that spot, that's not how you generate a 55-yard pass play to Sammy Watkins. You generate those type of opportunities sitting in 3rd and short, sitting in 2nd and manageable, being able to give the defense a lot to consider in how they want to defend you. That's going to be paramount in this game. And if I may, to throw in, it's not just offense and defense. Special teams is going to have a big part to play in this too. Time of possession in the field situationally is going to be critical. Isaiah McKenzie is one of the best kickoff returners nobody in the National Football League really ever talks about. Is a dynamic guy if he's able to take it out of the end zone. Jamison Crowder has been doing it for so long in the National Football League, has been so consistent in that way. A guy that maybe hasn't broken one for a touchdown yet this year on punts, but has been able to give them an extra 11, 12, 20 yards off their punt returns. Green Bay has to be able to win the time of possession and has to win the field position. I think those are the two small things in this matchup when you talk about little details that are really going to be looming over this game and making the Packers not be the 10-point dogs that everyone thinks they are, proving that they still are the Super Bowl contender a month ago. Everybody believed them to be.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you 100%. Some sponsor business here, Wes. Sirius XM NFL Radio delivers hard-hitting analysis and up-to-the-minute NFL news that true football fanatics need 24/7. 365. And at Cousin Subs, we have something for everyone, like our Wisconsin cheese curds, mac and cheese, golden fries, and creamy shakes, all paired with your favorite sub or sub in a bowl. Cousin Subs, 50 years of better.
And I got to stop myself on the Jamison Crowder thing. I knew I messed up on that one because Crowder actually is on injured reserve right now, so he's been out for a few weeks. Yep.
Oh, I didn't realize he
ankle
was,
injury. I forgot about that. As
out.
soon as I said it, I was like, that doesn't sound right to me. But they do still have to worry about Isaiah McKenzie though.
Yeah.
We're walking on a tightrope here, Mike. We do it live, right?
That's right. We do it live.
That's a part of the story.
Wanted to get your thoughts on a few other games around the league in Week 8 in the NFL. These are the ones, when I was glancing at the schedule, that jumped out to me in terms of, I want to kind of pay attention during the afternoon on Sunday as Sunday Night Football approaches to see how these turn out. Chicago is at Dallas, which looks like a much more interesting game than it did before last week when before the Bears had beaten the Patriots on the road in prime time. Arizona is at Minnesota. Arizona coming off of a Thursday night win with this quote-unquote mini bye. Minnesota coming off of its full bye week. Obviously, the Vikings with just one loss so far this year. San Francisco is at the LA Rams. The Rams are 3-3. The 49ers are 3-4. I don't think either team expected to be in that spot. And now those two NFC West rivals going head to head. And then probably what you would label the game of the biggest surprises certainly in the NFC at least, is the Giants with their 6-1 record are at Seattle, and the Seahawks are at 4-3 in first place in the NFC West, the only team in the NFC West that is above 500. So Chicago, Dallas, Arizona, Minnesota, San Fran, Rams, and Giants, Seahawks. What interests you there?
Well, seeing exactly where things are with Geno Smith is going to be because this will be a big test for him going up against that Giants defense.
Yeah.
How clean they play, how dynamic they've been with not a whole lot of household names. The thing about Smith, and you got to see how long these can go. We did plenty of stories over the past of, Ryan Fitzpatrick, had some amazing runs. And when you think about what he did in Tampa for a time and in Miami, but can you consistently do it? If Geno Smith can actually carry this out through the course of the year, I don't know if he would qualify as like a comeback player of the year type candidate. But you do start to get some like Rich Gannon type vibes from that. A guy that got an opportunity and then had to sit a lot. And I think you give John Schneider a lot of credit. You give Pete Carroll a lot of credit, and certainly Geno a lot of credit. That this is a guy that was completely written off.
Yep.
And when Russell Wilson got hurt a couple of years ago and he had to go in, a lot of people were mocking that. When they make the trade and Drew Lock comes over there and it's like, oh, you're going to have Drew Lock or Geno Smith, and everyone laughs about it. Geno Smith has played really good ball this year.
Yeah.
You have to do it consistently. 7 games does not make a season. But I'll tell you what, man, if he goes and they hold court against the Giants, that's something you're really going to have to start to respect and acknowledge. I do also really quickly want to touch on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers because as the Packers ready for this matchup with Buffalo, the Buccaneers are at a crossroads too.
Yeah.
3-4 going up against a Baltimore team that to a certain extent they've underachieved in some people's eyes to be sitting where they're at. That's a kind of a big game for both of those teams. And for Tampa, playing at home.
That's the one that's tonight, right?
That's the one that's tonight.
Thursday night.
Yeah,
Thursday night I was looking at the slate of Sunday afternoon games, so I missed that when I was
as
when I was
Thursday night
jotting them
football
down.
goes, and for anybody that listens to this over the weekend, I'm sorry we're wasting kind of your time here, but
yeah.
In terms of Thursday night football, this is as big as those games get
Yeah.
because you had a lot of injuries on both things. Mark Andrews didn't practice this week. I know Mike Evans. These are tough games to step into. And there's big implications for both of these squads.
Yeah, absolutely. With as far as the NFC North goes, The Bears 3-4 with a chance to get back to 500 on the road against the Cowboys, a Cowboys team that now has Dak Prescott back, and Prescott is playing in his second straight game, coming back from his thumb injury, and Arizona being on the road at Minnesota. I don't think anybody thought the Vikings would be 5-1 at this point. And one thing that's always interesting to me about Minnesota when they get in this position, and now this is a new regime, right? A new head coach, new GM, and all that. There are times that Minnesota has jumped out in front. The Vikings have jumped out in front and responded really well and stayed there and made a run like they did in 2017. They got all the way, even with Case Keenum, who was quote unquote backup quarterback, getting all the way to the NFC Championship game. There are other times Minnesota has jumped out front and then has not responded well to being the team everybody's chasing in the NFC North, and what has been a gap early on has closed. So I'm curious to see now that they've had their bye week, but now they have to go the rest of the way without a break. Can the Vikings sustain it? And an Arizona team that very up and down and all that, but also, as we know, very dangerous with Kyler Murray and those offensive weapons. I think that's a really interesting matchup just to see where Minnesota is and how the Vikings maybe set the tone, so to speak, to be the front runner in the NFC North, because hands down, that's what they are right now by a pretty good margin.
Yeah, and this is for the Vikings measure. This is that cross-conference division game that's set up based on your allotment last year. So these are two teams that I think in a lot of people's eyes underachieved last season, especially with how things started for Arizona.
Yeah.
So you're seeing with two different directions I think they've traveled to this point. But as you mentioned, the wild card in all this is Murray, because he's going to give the Vikings problems, considerations that they haven't really had to factor in yet. When you look at the extended plays, when you look at the creativity of the Kingsbury offense, that's where I want to see how this thing shuffles out. Offensively, the Vikings are dangerous, but there's so many known things about that offense, and in the way that Kirk Cousins plays the position, certainly the threat that Justin Jefferson presents, their backfield equation. But defensively is the one that you just wonder, Patrick Peterson facing his old team, is he still going to be able to capture, the fountain of youth there a little bit that he's had at times in Minnesota? There's a lot of things to consider in it, and certainly for the Packers measure, looking at the Vikings and then also seeing the Bears having a very competitive game against Dallas after trading Robert Quinn this week, how is that defense going to respond for Chicago? It's a very interesting point right now for this division.
Yeah, well, a lot of interesting games to pay attention to on Sunday before the big kickoff in the evening from Buffalo for Packers and Bills. With that, we'll call it a wrap on this edition of Packers Unscripted. Be sure to follow all of our coverage of the team. We'll have everything from Sunday night's game for you from Buffalo on Packers.com. For Wes, I am Mike. Thank you for tuning in, everybody. We'll see you next time.